Okay, so I know this is extremely spur of the moment. I look how I look. This is how I look when I relax. I'm not the most kempt right now, but I had a video idea that I felt compelled to just get up and do because I want to seize the moment. I have a lot of thoughts. This Kendrick Lamar Drake beef has been on my mind for the past few months, as well as how that relates to hip hop media, specifically the Joe Budden podcast. And when I say the Joe Budden podcast, I'm meaning the original four: Parks, Joe, Rory, and Mal, not Marissa. Obviously, I'm talking about the modern day, the Joe Budden podcast that got people going. I'm talking about that capsule because I feel like this Kendrick Lamar Drake beef obviously has a lot of reverberations all throughout like hip hop in general, regional hip hop, different people with different projects, as well as the podcasting space that centers around hip hop. And I just was laying in bed and I was like, you know what, let me get the fuck up, let me quickly make this video because we're gonna do a bunch of stuff in this video. We're gonna react to the beef in general, how we feel, general ideas about the beef. We're gonna talk about the Joe Budden podcast. We're going to talk about the breakup. We're going to talk about Rory and Mal versus Joe Budden podcast reaction to this beef and where they go from here. So I hope you're into that. We'll see how long this goes. I don't want to edit this, so we're just going to try and go with the vibes. Understand it's going to be rough around the edges, honey, but we're going to vibe with it. We're going to vibe with it. Okay. Oh, yeah. Also, this is important to say. Sorry, obviously, I'm big chillin'. I just got out of the shower. But I think it's important for me to enter in here and say, hey, my name is Madison, the creator behind the Madiswan channel. I have a podcast called Bloodstain where I talk about history through the lens of true crime. This is just one of those one-off videos that I just had to get out of my mind and have fun with. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm down to do these more casual things on the channel too, about hip hop, anything of my interest. I have a lot of interests. I'm a media gremlin. So if you like this video, make sure to show me and tell me you like it. And if you want me to talk more about any of the topics discussed here in any kind of deep way, definitely let me know in the comment section. Like and subscribe the video. Be sure to put that bell notification on so you're notified whenever I drop a new video. Share all of the things if you like it. Yeah, and my podcast, Bloodstained, drops once a month, so get into that. Definitely check that out. It's on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify Podcasts. Hit the link in the Linktree link, and it'll take you right to that. I also have a visual component on my YouTube channel, so get into that. Follow all my socials again in the Linktree down below. And cool. Okay, so let's get into some things. I think first and foremost, I really want to talk about the beef. Okay. Kendrick Lamar Drake beef was boiling under the surface for a long fucking time. I just think it's something that if these were the people that you listened to when you were growing up, you knew that they didn't like each other. Kendrick was hot as fish grease, so was Drake. It didn't make sense that they only had one collaboration together. And I think after the Control verse and the reverberations from the Control verse, I think honestly that is what solidified the beef happening, personally speaking. So none of this was surprising to me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. If you grew up with these people being the people that you saw grow into who they are as artists, you knew that they didn't fuck with each other. You knew that there was some smoke there. But I just want to go through quickly just what I understand about the beef, where I met these two individuals in general, and yeah, let's get into some things. Okay, so first and foremost, I met Drake. Again, this is going to be a little rough around the edges. Which is something that a lot of people do not understand. If you were a kid with an older sister who grew up in the early 2000s, you know this is Drake. This is Degrassi. This was everything. And I think that a lot of the conversation gets skipped over. Like, this was Drake. Like, look at this. This is not who he is now. You know what I mean? Face tattoos, really? Like, this was him. This is who I met. Drake has been a part of my life. Look at this. Like, Drake has been a part of my life since I was in single digits, and I just want to talk about this because I think it's important and missing from a lot of the conversations about this beef. Drake and Kendrick were inevitably going to beef. That was always going to be the situation. But the honest truth about it is you guys met Drake as Drake. I met him as Aubrey Graham / Jimmy, Wheelchair Jimmy, the actor from fucking Degrassi, which makes this whole conversation like a whole nother thing because you saw actually the start of his career. If you're just starting with knowing him as Drake, let's see, Drake now. If you're, look at this. That's a different person. Who is that? Look at this. Like, who is that? And it's like, okay, look at this. This pisses me off. Who is that? Like, that's not the same person. So I feel like when you're entering the chat, having been introduced to him as Drake, you're missing so many chapters of the story. So let me just quickly go through it from my perspective. I have an older sister. She was born in 92. I was born in 96. And she was into the show Degrassi. And Degrassi was the early 90s version of, this is very funny to see comparatively. Degrassi was the early 2000s, super early 2000s version of like Skins. Skins was my version of this type of TV show. I think Euphoria is teetering on an adult show, but similar vein as Degrassi. But that's probably this generation's version of this. But what I mean is these are shows that were coming of age shows that were marketed specifically to teen girls who they talked about high school and these kids and what they were experiencing, you know, peer pressure, sex, drugs, eating disorders, all of that kind of stuff, petty crimes, in this case, school shootings. These shows, there's like one show in a generation that is like this and functions this way. And for my sister's generation, she's, you know, obviously slightly older than me, it was Degrassi. And since she's 4 years older than me, I was watching what she's watching. Little sister stand up, you know what it is. You're cool because they're already cool and they've already been there, done that. So you get the inside scoop. So I was watching things like this when I was like 8, you know. So this is how I was introduced to Drake. And that is why, let's go to Drake. Drake, I don't know if this is his first mixtape. Sorry, this is so choppy, but okay, see? Okay, this mixtape, this is the first mixtape I had. This one, Comeback Season. We were early adopters of Drake. And the only reason why we were early adopters of Drake was because my sister recognized Drake from Degrassi. That is his early fan base. That is his core fan base, women of a particular age. And that is why he was such a crooner. He was changing fundamentally what hip hop could be, what it could show up as, how it could, you know, come off. And he was able to do that successfully because he already had a female fan base that was already very in tune with what he was doing, because no one else would recognize him as Drake, this new persona, other than the people that had been rocking with him from Degrassi times. And again, those shows are marketed towards teen girls overwhelmingly, and the subject matter is teen girl centric. So it's important to understand that aspect of the conversation, because with the girls of a particular age, they don't fuck with Drake anymore. The girls that started with Drake no longer fuck with Drake anymore. And started, when I say started, from this era, from the era before this, from this guy. The people that started with him no longer fuck with him anymore. And they've been not fucking with him for years, like 7+ years at this point, because he's abandoned his fan base from long, long ago. And they already got the scoop. They were never fully sold on whatever, let's see, this persona is that he's trying to kind of come off as. Like this guy, they were never sold on this because they knew him from being the dopey guy in the wheelchair who got shot in the back for bullying that kid, right? So this is important. Understand that this is particularly important. Now, Drake's been a part of my life since I've been in single digits. I'm 28 now. I was watching Degrassi at like 8, 9. You see what I'm saying? So I've seen the evolution firsthand of who he was slowly turning into over time. And when you're able to see that, can't be sold to you as legitimate. It just kind of looks like a costume to someone like me who knows who he was originally. Now, when it comes to Kendrick, let's see, I entered into the Kendrick chat, let's see, like 2010. And I want to shout out my friend Allie. Look at him. He looks so young. I want to shout out my friend Allie. This is how I met Kendrick, because she was the person who put me on to him. And I obviously was into Section 80. And then obviously we got, what's it called from that? Good Kid, Mad City. That was also in my high school phase. And at this time, Kendrick and Drake were kind of going album for album, in my opinion. Like, Kendrick had Section 80, and then Drake had Take Care. And then Kendrick had Section 80, Drake had Take Care, or Take Care was right before Section 80. I don't really exactly remember, but it was around the same time. And then Good Kid, Mad City came out around the same time in my senior year of high school, when Nothing Was the Same came out. So these are like going bar for bar, and these are making impacts very much in hip hop of the time. They were the young, they were the bubbling, and these were back-to-back projects from both of these guys that were really, really fucking successful. Obviously, you had the collaboration that came from the fact that Kendrick met Drake in Toronto in like on the 16th in June in like the 20 teens, and he gave him Section 80. There's a whole story about it, and they chopped it up. And then through that, he brought him on tour with him with A$AP Rocky. So he feels like he has some sort of ownership over his career. And then from there, you get kind of this breaking of them right after Good Kid, Mad City, where they did the collab with Poetic Justice. And then they obviously did Fucking Problems for A$AP Rocky, which was the last collaboration that they ever did together, right? So things cooled off. Now, a lot of people have a lot of speculation of that. Looking back, there's a lot of shady Drake interviews where he's like shading Kendrick, especially after the Control verse comes out. And essentially he, is really shady towards Kendrick, because I think he feels like he has ownership over Kendrick's career because he put him on. The reality was Kendrick was bubbling and he was going to pop eventually, whether Drake gave him a chance or someone else gave him a chance. So Drake taking full responsibility or ownership over like the career of Kendrick is absolutely fucking bonkers, honestly. So let's go. I think we should just listen to the Control verse. My alias aliens who respond peddling sin, thinking maybe when you get old you realize I'm not gonna fold or demise. I don't smoke crack, motherfucker, I sell it. Bomb on this shit, so many bombs with the alarm like Vietnam on this shit. Get it even if you're in the way. If you're in it, better run for Pete's sake. I heard the barbershops being great debates all the time. Now who's the best MC? Kendrick, Jigga, and Nas. Eminem, Andre 3000, the rest of y'all. New niggas, just new niggas, don't get involved. But this is hip hop and them niggas should know what time it is. This was a huge deal back in the day. I got love for you all, but I'm trying to murder you niggas, trying to make sure your core fans never heard of you niggas. I'm trying to raise the ball. How are you trying to jump and get it? Okay, you get the point. You get the point. Like, he was going in. We know he was going in. That was a Control verse, right? Sorry about the poor quality, but we're just vibing here. This is just casual. You guys have heard this all before, or I mean, I'm hoping you have. But basically, that verse shook the entire hip hop game at the time. Like, mind you, this is a 3-minute feature. The Control verse is from a song that was Big Sean's song, where he got upstaged again, poor baby. But yeah, this was a Big Sean song where Kendrick was a feature, and his feature just shook the entire hip hop game to a point where you had all these random people either referencing the track, referencing that they were too good to respond to the track, responding on the Control instrumental to Kendrick, or just talking about it in general. If you were hip hop relevant at the time, if you did an interview, you were going to be asked about this Control verse because he named names and he named his competition, right? Some people were butthurt because they weren't considered to be named. Other people were kind of feeling weird about being named. And this is where we get to where things really kind of have the final severance between Kendrick and Drake. Drake, let's see, did a few interviews. I don't want to have to listen to it. Let's see. Drake Control verse. Drake did a few interviews, and he did this Elliot Wilson one where he calls it forgettable. We can watch this.
It's up and elevated too much?
Nah, I feel like that's it. It's like, you know, he's the new guy to love, and of course, I mean, rightfully so. He's super talented, you know. But thank you. But he's in time. Okay, and then it was a moment to talk about. Are you listening to it now at this point in time?
He was being super shady. You see how shady he is? Let's see. Let's go to the Angie Martinez one because I think she pressed it more. Oh, hold on.
Right now, man, control the record. People still banging it.
It was like one of those sort of like fleeting like Twitter frenzies.
See how he's downplaying it?
It was cool for what it was, you know.
He was downplaying it.
Or, you know, next year.
So he was downplaying it, right? And I think for someone like Kendrick, because the reality is, I think the control verse and the like that verse are they're foils for each other in such a intense way, and we're obviously going to get to that. But they're foils for each other because Drake had this narrative with his diss songs that came out recently that Kendrick just throws stones and hides his hand and he won't drop and he won't address anything and he won't actually go through with a full-scale war against Drake, right? That's been his sentiment. But you're seeing Drake on an apology tour, and that's fucking revisionist history. You're seeing Drake on an apology tour after Kendrick dropped a verse on someone else's song that shook up the rap game. He wasn't the only person named. He was the only person that went on an apology tour and said that he felt hurt and he wasn't going to dignify that with a response, and it was a little Twitter fad and it was this, he was shading the song, when in actuality, when you were living in sentient during that time, you knew that this verse has staying power, so much so that you don't even realize it's a Big Sean song to begin with, right? So Drake was going on his whole bullshit with all of this, like, I'm just kind of like what he does now. I'm too big to respond. This was some Twitter stuff. He didn't actually mean it. And at the end of the day, like, you're not listening to it now is kind of his attitude. And it's just interesting that he took up the role of being like taunting Kendrick, like drop, 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 when Kendrick has never been scared. You were the one that didn't go back and forth with him this time. And you went on an apology tour, and because you were in such high favor, people allowed you on their platforms to do that and didn't press you enough about it. But hip-hop is hip-hop, and Kendrick was just honoring the sport. You listened to the verse just like I did. Was that a specific intense call out? No, he was saying, I respect you guys. You guys are my peers or my slightly superiors, and I'm calling you out because hip-hop is hip-hop, and I'm setting the bar high, and I want this to be competitive, and I want us all to want to get into the field of being the best and thinking that we're the best, right? Friendly shit. He took it. He's sensitive. He's sensitive, as we are realizing. So this happens. This was the final severance. He goes on this whole control verse cleanup thing and going out and doing PR as to why he didn't say anything. So then we have the Black Hippie BET cipher. Let's see. Hold on. Now, and this is where the jabs kind of start, because this is where Kendrick is calling out Drake about his apology tour about the control verse. So let's get into this. He sounds like Eminem here. He loves Eminem, I know that. The Da Vinci Code. See? Okay, let's run that back because that was obviously...
Go back to church and steal crackers at the new. What are we doing? I'm about to crack the Da Vinci Code. Yeah, and nothing been the same since they dropped control and tucked the sense of the rapper back in his pajama clothes.
You caught that, right? Okay, so this was on BET. This was a BET Black Hippie Cypher. This was 2013, over 10 years ago. And so you see what's happening. Okay, now that I laid it out for you, you understand, like, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. Really, they weren't homies after fucking problems. But Control kind of hammered something in where Drake decided to kind of go on the offense on the media side and just clean up his hip hop image because he didn't want to seem like weak or unable to hang because he wasn't going to respond to Kendrick. I think he was spooked by the Control verse much more than he wanted to let on. I think he knew from then he could not compete with Kendrick Lamar when it came to putting shit on wax. But I think that he was at a very pinnacle point of his career, and I don't think he wanted to throw dirt on his name or allow for dirt to be thrown. So boom, this goes on, right? Okay, we're all familiar. Now they trade, disses back and forth. Now looking back, a lot of those old songs of Kendrick, especially some of the ones he played at the Pop Out, you notice are actually Drake disses or could be taken as Drake disses. The one where he mentions ghostwriters. I mean, there's a lot of songs. King Kunta. But anyway, we have all of this going on. Now, mind you, at this point, Drake does his back and forth with Meek, kills Meek. So Drake is on a super high, super high. He was at a really big pinnacle. Like this era, Drake was huge. And he only got bigger after what happened with Meek Mill. And that solidified him also as being battle tested. He didn't engage with Kendrick with the Control verse, but he engaged with Meek. And he went back to back, and we all know what happened with that. So let's listen to back, because I think, or at least a little bit of it, because I think that's relevant to this conversation. And I honestly wasn't really into Drake at this time, or into just what he was doing at this time. So I don't really know the song well, but let's get into it.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh man. Not again. Yeah, I learned the game from William Wesley, you can never check me. Back to back for the niggas that didn't get the message. Back to back like I'm on the cover of Lethal Weapon. It's weighing heavy on my conscience. Yeah, and fuck you left the boy no options. I wanna see my niggas go insane. You gon' make me step out of my fucking frame. You gon' make me buy bottles for Charlemagne. You gon' make me go out of my fucking way. I waited 4 days, nigga, where y'all at?
Okay, you get it. Now, this had never really been done before. I don't know why people are going so dumb, but this was at the height of social media getting relevance. This was a real social media back and forth rap beef in a real way, with Drake being at the pinnacle of his career. He had just been called out by Meek on Twitter for having ghostwriters, which obviously was fucking true, and we know that it's true. Leaking all the evidence in the reference tracks on Twitter every single fucking day. But that wasn't common knowledge. Like, some things you guys aren't understanding, like, you guys were young. This was not common knowledge at the time. People were thinking Drake was putting paper to pen, like, writing every fucking thing. So accusing this dude of not only being a phony, because in hip hop, really putting the pen to the pad is a big deal. It's really responsible. It's really respectable in that era. And if you're not doing that, then are you really hip hop? Because hip hop is really at its core about authenticity to a culture. And part of that culture is writing your own shit. So Meek Mill calls this out. Mind you, Meek is dating Nicki at this time. So anyway, Meek's dating Nicki at this time. He goes on Twitter, calls Drake out, says, "You have ghostwriters." Everyone's like, and then the leak of the Quentin Miller version of, I forgot what song it was, but it was on If You're Reading This Is Too Late. Mind you, this is also important in terms of my personal story. So I said, there's Section 80, there was Take Care that were kind of similar, and then we had Nothing Was the Same and Good Kid, Mad City towards the ending part of my high school career. Again, they were kind of like slightly one-upping each other, and I would say Drake was ahead because he was in the game longer and more popular. Then Drake, after Nothing Was the Same, dropped If You're Reading This Is Too Late, a surprise drop that no one was expecting. And that mixtape, I guess is what it's called, had arguably some of his hardest beats and hardest raps, where he was actually stepping out of that R&B hip hop fusion pop bag and stepping into this more like I got enemies, kind of bag. And that was super well received. Now, this, I think, is one of his first really big transformations where he's transforming into this more hardened, like, I'm a rap artist type thing. Like, I'm hip hop, I'm tough kind of guy. Before, he was kind of like this crooner that was like, oh, I love her, unrequited love. Oh, she's a stripper, but I love her kind of thing. Now he was on this kind of like, I got enemies, I'm a fucking legend, I'm tooting my own horn type thing. So to know that there is Quentin Miller, I think that's his name, who had a reference track with Quentin Miller's vocals leaked for, I think it was Energy. I'm not sure if it was Energy, but one of the songs on that album was a chink in Drake's armor, a big time chink, because the whole time everyone was like, he's writing his songs, most people were. Then Meek calls him out. Mind you, he's dating Nicki at the time. Meek calls him out on Twitter. It's a huge, big fucking deal because Drake is at the top at this point, really at the top, because he created like new peaks, So he was at the top of this era. And he dropped the first, diss song. Then he dropped this one. And where I stopped it, he was like, I gave you 4 days. Where the fuck you guys are? Where the fuck y'all at? And it was true because he dropped back to back, which is why Kendrick dropped back to back to back when it came to their beef later. So you kind of are seeing this thing now. Drake takes this combined with what he was marketing towards with If You're Reading This Is Too Late, plus takes this victory, and now he's battle tested against a drill rapper from Philadelphia who supposedly is really into gang shit. Now he's solidified as a hip hop artist. He's battle tested, and now he's on another level because this was iconic. People were like ringing this off in the club the same way they were doing Not Like Us. So it was like big deal. So then this goes on. Drake is doing his thing. He has very successful albums. This is now I'm in college. So if you're reading this, It's Too Late was in college. Me personally, this is where me and Drake divorce. I can honestly say the last album of Drake's that I listened to front to back was If You're Reading This Is Too Late. More Life and all the other things, views and stuff, I have it in my iTunes. There were songs that I liked, but I did not front to back it like I did If You're Reading This It's Too Late, because Kendrick came with To Pimp a Butterfly, which is, arguably, come on now. This album for me was just at an important time in my life. I was 18, going to college, figuring out who I was as a woman, trying to understand myself as a person. And ultimately, a lot of things were happening at that time. Black Lives Matter was getting heated up. Trayvon Martin died when I was in high school still. We had Mike Brown died. Then we had, obviously, Sandra Bland later that summer. And it was one of those things where it was just kind of like, I'm figuring out who the fuck I am. I'm in sociology class getting my mind blown every lecture. And I'm realizing who I am, my sense of self as a Black woman at this time. And this album was the soundtrack to that discovery. So I have a lot of biases, obviously, but this was an insanely creative and powerful album for someone at the time who was watching this person go from Section 80, Good Kid, Mad City to this. Like, this was his sophomore album, and it really solidified him. It was incredible. If you were there, you understand. But it was a soundtrack to my early budding adulthood. And because I fell in love with that album for so many reasons, it became the soundtrack to my life. And I started to look down at Drake's music, and I was less gravitating towards it. I didn't listen to Nothing Was the Same anymore. I didn't really listen to If You're Reading This, It's Too Late that much anymore. I was gravitating towards this album, towards Kendrick stuff, and finding new meaning in even his old shit. And I kind of was like, wow, hip hop can be like this. So Drake's stuff started to turn more into pop, and I would only engage with it if I was walking a very specific path, or I was feeling a very specific way, or I was going to a party and we were pre-gaming, or it was at the party, but it was never me running an album front to back after If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. This is me personally, okay? So this is where me and Drake kind of divorce, and Kendrick becomes my guy because I'm just like, this is art, at the time. And it was. So that happens. I don't know why I'm on here, but we're just vibing out. This happens, and to me, this is where the early Drake leavers start to leave, because comparatively you're seeing someone grow every project, and that's only ever underscored with the projects that came out even in my college career. People like to say Kendrick wasn't consistent, but he had To Pimp a Butterfly in my early years. He had Untitled, he had Black Panther, he had Damn. That was all in a 4-year span. Mind you, Drake had Views, like I said, More Life, all of these other ones that people were really fucking with. But Kendrick was also going pretty much album for album and impact for impact in a different way. And you see a theme and a pattern with Kendrick where he's one-upping himself and he's being true to the fact that he is an artist and each album is an era of his life. He's putting himself in his music. With Drake, at this point forward, his music all started to sound the same. I'm rich, sexy big booty bitches, strippers, croon, unrequited love, maybe pop, hotline bling. And then we have, you know what I mean? Like during that time, we have someone who's bar for bar beating themselves. Like this to Damn is a crazy run. But mind you, there's Untitled. There's a Black Panther album in between that. Like crazy fucking run. And Drake at that time, it was just like he was definitely consistent with the album releases, but it was like, I'm super rich and I'm at the top and I'm paranoid because I'm at the top and I have enemies because I'm at the top and I'm rich. And it was just like, I'm over it, especially when shit like this exists. People get tired of saying this analogy and using this analogy, but it's important to understand that it's a fucking real analogy. Microwave TV dinner every single day versus a home cooked meal. That's what the difference is. McDonald's is good on the sly. We're boycotting, but you know what I mean. Their fries are good on the sly. You know what I mean. A little snack here, a little drunk night here to pad the stomach down, of course. But it's like, that's not the best burger in town. It's just convenient, and and you can expect what it's going to taste like, and it might hit the spot for that specific craving, but it's not just like hands down the best burger, the best chicken nuggets that ever existed. That's just not true. It's just quick and convenient, and that's what I think Drake is. Drake is pop music, and it's obvious because with pop stars, you see that a lot of times they're not writing their own shit. They're a product in and of itself. Even their albums are products, and they are, the voice that is the one that speaks it to the world. But there's a lot of people behind the scenes curating everything about their shit. And that's why it's called pop, because it's curated and it's made to be marketed widely. And you see that with Drake. Now, so we're here now. We're here at this area where I'm personally divorced from Drake, and you're kind of seeing to me Drake's projects go in one direction and Kendrick's go in a different direction. And he's getting money and accolades, and all these people are in love with him, and he has the biggest, widest hip-hop audience in the world. But Kendrick is continuing to stay true, getting Pulitzer Prizes and doing things that are unapologetically Black, unapologetically him, and unapologetically art-centered, if that makes sense. So boom, right? We got that. We got all of that. Now we have to get into, I guess, the Joe Budden podcast. Now, let's get into this. Oh, it's so sad. Okay. So the Joe Budden podcast, as you can see, this is Joe. If you've never listened to the Joe Budden podcast, this is a Joe Budden podcast. Now, these are current pictures. This is the pod that I knew. I was getting into hip hop media a lot during my college years, and everyday struggle with academics and Joe Budden on Complex led me to the Joe Budden podcast in about like 2016, 2017. And I fell in love. I fell in love with these guys' dynamic. I fell in love with their vibe. Like, they are just really fucking silly, Problematic, yes, definitely. On the edge, definitely very blue humor a lot of times, but hilarious and interesting. Mind you, I was a girl who was into this show. Hold on. Let me go back to YouTube. Called Black Men Revealed. Me and my sister were really into this. I don't know if there's a singular person who understands. Black Men Revealed. Okay. Oh, people were searching for it. Okay, see? It was on TV1. This is when we didn't have cable. Because long story short, we didn't watch TV 5 days out of the week or 4 days out of the week during school nights. We could only watch TV on Friday, Saturday, and sometimes Sunday after chores. So we didn't have cable for many, many years. So my sister and I, during the summers when we were home alone, would watch a lot of daytime TV, Maury, Jerry Springer, that kind of shit. And then these shows would come on because TV1 was not cable. So, for example, this is Black Men Revealed.
And you don't do this right. You don't do that right. You don't take the kids out. You don't help me around the house. I mean, just yang, 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 yang. Nothing turns a brother off, and nothing will make a brother not call you back more than a lot of yap in your ear.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's just keep it real.
I don't know too many brothers like us that sit around and talk about, women that ain't got status or women that ain't doing this.
Okay, you see where it's going. Now, I was again, single digits. As long as my sister was old enough to watch me, I was able to be home alone without my parents. So we would just sit all day and just watch what was on daytime TV, and this would come on, and we loved it. We DVR'd it, and it was just a bunch of black men in huge ass suits sitting around at some set just talking about different conversations, about women and relationships and money and friendships and stuff like that. And I loved it. Mind you, as you can see, I have a short haircut. I like to go to the barbershop, and it's similar to that vibe. The Joe Budden podcast made me feel like a fly on the wall, observing black men from a different perspective and having conversations that I never would necessarily be privy to. And that's how I feel in the barbershop. That's why I love going to the barbershop. And that's why I listen to the Joe Budden podcast. So this was me as a kid listening to this shit. I don't always agree. Obviously, if you know my content, you know that I'm pretty I have my own moral compass. I have my own stances on things, obviously. But that's why I like the Joe Budden podcast. So the Joe Budden podcast started as a podcast called I'll Name This Podcast Later. And it was with Joe, this girl Marissa, and Rory, the white guy. Then on episode 70, Mal came in to just sit in for one podcast. And it went so well that he became a fixture. And then the podcast became Rory, Mal, Joe, and Parks. And it was that for many, many years, from episode 77 to episode almost 700, almost 600. Then there was a big severance. So I just want to look at some of the good times.
Listen, if I'm scared enough, these wheels still work. That's all I motherfucker. Let 2 pit bulls run up in this motherfucker right now. See how fast I get out of here.
I'm squaring up.
2 pit bulls. Yeah, I know.
100%.
You will lose.
I will fight.
Okay.
Your dogs that love you got you good.
Wait, time out. So you think you have a better chance of outrunning the pit bull than I have of fighting one?
Yes.
Oh, you got me all the way fucked up.
Okay.
And
I can climb some shit.
I was gonna say there's a fence somewhere.
I'm jumping 2 cars on top of one of those vans outside. Yeah. I'm straight.
That's pretty behind.
You sit here, that you gonna get one swing. And when you mess with that, the next nigga's on your left bicep.
And I'm going to drag them both to the nearest holes, and I'm going to spray them off of me.
This nigga's watching too many movies. This nigga's watching too many movies.
Okay, you get what I'm saying. It's silly, just a bunch of guys talking shit about pop culture. At this point, it was mainly about music and all of that shit. Now, during COVID, there's a big severance that happens between the pod. Basically, Joe was doing some sketchy business shit, and they were playing nice as a collective for the fans and for us front-facingly, but these guys were not getting paid or compensated properly, so they ended up separating and doing their own thing. So Rory and Mal had their own podcast. Let's see. We can do a skit. Let's show the original. See, this is hold on. This is 3 years ago. See, so during COVID.
I got fired after I quit. Now you know how it feels.
So much for white privilege. Yeah. Doesn't mean we need to get a job. I don't know if we have to get jobs, but I think it'd be good to do something. I mean, I hit my grandpa to see if there's any construction gigs, but...
Okay, you get the point. So basically, this is their coming out party 3 years ago where they're like, we're the new Rory and Mal, we're, you know, whatever. Basically, what happened was, long story short, for those who aren't in the tea, Joe went on a pod and basically... They had not been on a pod for a couple times. And I know that means something with Joe because he's very volatile. He gets on a pod. He basically screams at them, fires them, and accuses them of just being shitty workers and all this shit. Then Rory and Mal and them do a pod together, which was super awkward. And Mal and Joe were just not good friends. It was over at that point. Rory was still trying to fix things with Parks. It didn't work out. Okay. The severance happens. It's a lot of drama for a lot of days. And then Rory and Mal come out with a episode of a pod on Vimeo where they asked everyone to pay $1 and they basically put on, said the whole story from their perspective. It was pretty well done. It was very, very succinct. They were pretty calm. Joe was a lot more emotional at his, and they basically told the story that made sense. Basically, they had been sniffing around and they were not getting paid correctly, and Joe was trying to salary them when they had built the podcast up from the ground up, essentially, all three of them. Sweat equity, and deals were starting to come through, but they were not seeing the back end of those deals, and the accounting was fucked up. And then there came a point where the accountant for the pod that Joe hired made a $400,000 accounting mistake that Rory's accountant saw. So then that made both of them say, hey, actually, we need all of the accounting for the podcast just so we make sure we're getting our splits correct, because if they're making mistakes like that, that's so obvious and egregious, it speaks to sketchy business happening type thing. This was all happening secretly behind the scenes over years, okay? We didn't know as viewers. They were still playing nice together. Then things kind of boiled up through COVID, and essentially they had demanded, like, yo, we're not coming back to the pod unless you have this. No. That they were demanding the accounting. Joe told Rory, hey, you don't show up to the pod. Mal took that personally for some reason, because he was kind of like, who gave you the right to fire this dude? And if he's not coming, then I'm not coming, because we're asking for the same thing. Joe felt slighted by Mal because he thought him and Mal were closer friends, because obviously they were longer friends. But Mal was kind of like standing on principle, where it's like, you're also screwing me over, so am I your friend type thing. They both didn't show up. That's a pod where Joe fired them publicly and no one was in the room except for Parks. Then they came back for one more pod episode. It was bad. The fallout was bad. They make their video. Then they decide they get a deal, a podcasting deal, the two of them. And then they start their journey 3 years ago with the new Rory and Mal podcast. Okay. Now, this is important to the story because there was another beef that happened during the Joe Budden podcast era. I'm kind of jumping around, but you get it. So there was another beef between Drake and Pusha T. This was a really big beef. I think this was 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Huge beef, another beef. Basically, if you don't know, Drake and Kanye West had been going back and forth for a long time. Some people say it's about Kim. Some people say that Kim allegedly slept with Drake while she was married to Kanye. I don't know the tea, but that's the tea. So there was beef between Kanye and Drake for many, many years. They would make up, then break up kind of thing. Pusha T was signed to Good Music under Kanye West, and they were very close. And Drake kept doing what he does, which is slyly diss people. The same way he was slyly dissing Kendrick, he was dissing Ye, he was dissing people. And basically Pusha T took it upon himself to go on the offense for Kanye and say, I'm engaging you in a beef. So he drops a song, then Drake drops a song and mentions Pusha T's wife, and then Pusha T comes out with this song, which was probably the first time ever that Drake was famous that there was actually a real chink in his armor, like for real, where people are kind of like, wait, is he that great of a rapper type thing? So first of all, let's get into this. This is a cover art. Okay. This is a real photo of Drake. He really did this. He said that it had to do with some sort of statement he was making about being a black actor. He's not fully black, and this is really problematic. So anyway, let's listen to this song, and let's get into this song really quick. Okay, hold on. Also, iconic beat. This is the story of OJB from 444, Jay-Z. This picture is crazy. Like, and you're seeing themes happen. The spider joint. And you know we gotta cut the heads off these snakes, right? Watch the body drop. Drug dealing aside, goes right in the side. Let's have a heart-to-heart about your pride. Even though you're multi, I see that your soul don't look alive. The M's count different when baby divides the pie. Wait, let's examine why. Now, this is a super iconic diss record and will forever be iconic because this is a diss record where Pusha T reveals for Drake that he has a secret child, which is obviously, what's his name? Adonis. And so, yeah, this is iconic for many reasons. The beat is iconic. This was really a bad look for Drake. Obviously, we're looking at him in blackface. Like, let's not pretend. This was a horrible look for Drake. And Joe has a long history of dissing Drake because Drake does what he does. Drake had early in his career, and it seems unbelievable, right? But Drake is a student of hip hop, so he was a big fan of Pusha T. He was a big fan of Joe Budden, and he had said that in many interviews early on. He had basically kind of taken Joe Budden's flow and started to kind of slightly dish Joe Budden. I don't know if they had some women in common or what the true beef was, but Joe had basically took it upon himself, his unhinged self, and did several, like 7 rap disses that he dropped against Drake. Drake never really responded because he thought he was too big to respond, and to be frank, he was. But a lot of this dissing Drake thing kind of started off with obviously Meek, and then obviously Joe, and then we have Pusha T. Now you can see just by the picture choice alone that Pusha T is pulling the same thread that Kendrick ends up yanking out. You see what I mean? I mean, look at this. This is a minstrel show. But this song is iconic because Pusha T is like, hey, you also have a kid. And then Drake was like, I don't have a kid. And then on Scorpion, the album that came out after this, which is highly regarded, we'll get into some of that tea as well. He was like, yeah, actually, I do have a son. I was hiding the son from the world, not the world from my son. Or I was hiding my son. I don't remember, but you get what I mean. You remember the quote. So this happened. And this was huge. This was towards the end of my college career. And so Joe had already had a previous beef that was one-sided with Drake, and they were back on okay terms. Like, Joe was starting to be a budding person in the hip-hop podcasting space. He was an OG in the space, and he was starting to get really respected and getting a lot of good looks. So Drake and him were on better terms than they were when they were beefing, but they weren't, like, close or anything, obviously. This happens, and then Joe... Pusha T. Joe has a podcast episode, this iconic podcast episode, where he interviews Pusha T. We see him on this pod.
Push walked in the room and said hi to every single person.
So this is an iconic Joe Budden episode. If you were there at the time, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. This was super iconic and interesting. It was fully detailed, and he had the wherewithal to choose Joe's platform to sit down, which added legitimacy to Joe and his pod. This was a time where Joe's pod was hotter than fish grease in general, but the fact that at the height of this beef, Pusha decided to sit with Joe and actually have a over 3-hour conversation about where the beef started, why he did the beef, answered all their questions, discussed everything. And it was interesting because these two, I mean, you see Joe and Pusha, these two, obviously, you know what I'm saying? Sorry, I had to check. These two both have beef with Drake at this point. You know what I mean? So it was interesting to come on this platform and actually talk about it with people who understand hip hop, which is Joe, and be allowed to fully explain yourself as to why he attacked. Very interesting podcast episode. I would tap into this if you have not watched it already. It's history. So that happens. And then mind you, at the time, talking to Pusha T in the way that Joe talked to Pusha T on this episode was not heard of. Pusha T went to Drink Champs. I don't know if it was the same time. See, okay, this was more accurate to this is closer to when the beef happened 5 years ago. Then we have 2 years ago, Pusha T went on Drink Champs. Now this is during COVID. And this fucking interview was so shitty. Nori's a terrible interviewer in general. I do not like Drink Champs unless I like the person going on. But he basically was like, don't you feel like you went too far? Don't you feel like you went too far? And like Pusha was like, no, there's no thing. You can't go too far in this shit. Like, this is just what it is, you know?
I don't want it. Let's just not even.
So let me ask.
Yeah.
Has Jay Prince ever reached out to you? Like,
I spoke to Jay Prince numerous times, man.
So
Not about him.
okay.
Hell no. Can't
Okay.
nobody talk to me about him.
All right.
Hell no.
Because I also heard you say you don't want to wreck it with him.
I don't.
You don't want to be in the... I'm going to be honest.
I don't want it. Let's just not even.
If I
I don't
have
want
beef with
it.
Drake, I want to wreck it afterwards.
I don't want it.
Okay, so you're seeing this interview. It gets worse, but they're basically kind of like grilling him a little bit. And it's like, these are OGs in the hip hop industry. Like, why are you not understanding, or you're acting fucking obtuse about the rules of hip hop engagement in battle? At the end of the day, there's no rules in a hip hop battle. It just is what it is. People sling mud. People get dirty. People say they fucked your wife. They go crazy. It is what it is. People say lies. People say truths. People expose tea. I mean, let's go back to the 50 Cent Rick Ross beef, where 50 Cent officially proved and showed that Rick Ross was just a persona and he was actually a prison guard, which is like very anti-hip hop. You know what I mean? And he's acting like he's this fucking drug dealer who's like getting keys from overseas, and he was actually a fucking prison officer. Like, beefs get dirty, and everyone knows this. Nori's an OG in the game. So for him to start policing the line of respectability when it comes to what is appropriate in a rap battle, whenever someone in hip hop is asked directly about, is there rules in beef, people say no. People say no. And so he was sitting here playing the Drake line. And this is important in the whole story because he is acting, Nori is acting like a lot of media personas were acting at the time because Drake was so big. And the blackface and the baby and the stuff, like, this was a big fucking deal. So a lot of media people in the hip hop space were like, yo, like, are you sure you didn't go too far? To Pusha T whenever he'd do an interview. He couldn't do an interview without being asked that question. And he'd always have the same answer. He was always consistent, like there's no rules in hip-hop beef. And Drake called out his wife first. He crossed the line first, but no one wanted to pay attention to that. This is important to talk about because Drake, again, goes on a fucking interview tour similar to like he did with Control, which is why I personally feel like with Control then, and I knew that then, Drake didn't want to engage. Drake didn't want to go hop on wax against Kendrick even with Control because he knew the tea. He knew that he couldn't keep up, and he did not want to sacrifice the place he was, which was above Kendrick, honestly, at the time. He did not want to sacrifice that even if it was friendly. So he went on this woe is me, I thought we were friends. I put him on his first tour, kind of tour on all these interviews with people like, yeah, like, are you guys still listening to it? No, like very shady and bitchy. And he did the same thing with Pusha T and kind of was like, well, I'm too big to really respond to this. This is too dark. Let's see. LeBron, Pusha T. He goes on LeBron's fucking stupid ass show. Wait, I don't know where this is. I don't know what this is. Anyway, he goes on LeBron's show and he does an interview with Elliott Wilson, which is a pretty good interview, honestly. And he talks about this.
I have no desire to ever mend anything with that person. And, yeah, that situation just went it just went where it went, and it's just there's no turning back. It's not. Like
Is anyone else realizing how ugly he
It
is?
wasn't even about battle rap or any of that. It was just the information was too shocking. It was, like I said, it was on his part. It was a genius chess move. He obviously has no, like, you know, when it comes to me, he's not going to have it.
Doesn't he sound like he did on The Heart Part 6? Like, it was a brilliant chess move, but, you know, like when he's like, that was some good exercise. Like, when he's beaten, he has the same tells. He's rubbing his chin, he's acting like he's too good for it, whatever. And that's his way of saving face. The truth is, he didn't have a counter to this move. So he called Jay Prince to crush the beef behind the scenes. But the reality of the situation was, Drake didn't have a counter move. That was too iconic of a chess move. You had the blackface picture combined with the baby reveal, which is crazy as fuck, and the baby mama reveal, which was crazy as fuck. And he had nothing prepared for that because Pusha T is also a family man. And so it was one of those things where it was also a Kendrick thing. If you go back to the Joe Budden interview, he is talking about the same shit that Kendrick talked about in Euphoria, where he's like, you're putting money in the street, dude, and coming up with nothing. You're putting money in the street, and I have loyal people around me. That may work for you and getting tea on you, but that doesn't work for me. And so that's when Pusha T really went nuclear, because not only did you mention my wife, but you're putting $100,000 in the streets to try and get tea on me. No. And that's what happens. Like, Drake takes this kind of route when he can't find the tea he needs in order to counter the tea they have on him. And that's the difference. Okay, I'm doing this for the final time. I've been trying to film these sections for 2 days, and my mic keeps fucking up. So we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. First point, Drake and family/women. I think this is a really important point that a lot of people aren't really hammering home or connecting. In that clip that I showed you guys where he was talking on LeBron's podcast about how much he loved Rihanna, and he kind of talked about how he was upset that his parents gave him a childhood he had to wrap his head around or whatever, meaning that, you know, referring to the fact that his dad wasn't present and there was a lot going on and they probably had issues co-parenting, blah, 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 you know? And then you see who he chooses to attack and how. And you see that if it's not talking about someone's husband that he used to deal with, he's talking about some women, referencing some ex, or, you know, just talking down on someone's wife. That's his strategy. That's what got Pusha T pissed off. That's what got Kanye pissed off. That Kiki, do you love me? That got Kanye tight, because for years and years and years, it had been alluded to or suggested, and in the blind items allegedly said that Kim and Drake fucked around while she was married to Kanye. And this is why Kanye and Drake don't, you know, get along. Part of the reason why. And that Drake kept making allusions to Kim in a lot of his music. And to get at Kanye. And then you have another instance with Pusha T, where Pusha T obviously shot first, but that was in reference to Drake shooting at Kanye by way of Kim. And then Drake responds and mentions Pusha T's wife. And then Pusha T does the story of Adidon, which we know is iconic and just nuclear in so many ways, and announced the baby. Which was crazy. And then you see this with fucking Kendrick, where it's like, okay, you know, we're going back and forth. We have been for 10 years. And then you mention Whitney and push-ups, or a reference to Whitney and push-ups. And I'm warning you in Euphoria, nigga, keep my woman's name out of your mouth. We can just have this be friendly competition, but stop mentioning my family. And he immediately continues to mention his family. I think that Drake has beef with people in happy homes, in happy relationships. I think he will never get over the fact that Rihanna moved on to A$AP Rocky and had 2 children, and it seems happier than ever, glowing. They seem like a perfect match. It seems like they love each other. You can see he's pissed that people like Serena finally found somebody that loved her for her, and her family's growing and she's thriving. And then you see Pusha T, again, married with kids. You see Kendrick, again, married with kids. You saw Kanye, married with kids. Kind of cuckoo, but, you know, married with kids nonetheless. So it's interesting that he has this pattern of shooting at women to get to the men, but also shooting at and trying to blow up happy homes and families. But also, it's not even just the kids. It's also just women in general. He's calling out Megan. He's called out a bunch of women in the past unnecessarily and just started beefing with them unnecessarily. He's a weirdo. I think he's one of those people that he may be perceived he was looked over. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he was biracial, raised by a Jewish woman, and I think that plays into how much he likes young white girls, but that's a conversation for another day. That's a theory, allegedly, for another day. But I think that he was looked over when he was growing up. I think that he wasn't swaggy, and I know that because I saw him grow up in his acting career, and I saw the beginnings of his rap career, and it took a lot to get the image that we're getting of him now. And I think that people like that focus so hard on succeeding. There's no success. There's no enjoying the journey. There's no just like happy to be successful, content with your life. It's success in the form of like trying to spite somebody or like do this revenge plot on the people that you were perceived to have wronged you in your past, so you can like use your power to like make them feel like shit. And it's just weird. And I think that he has lots of parent issues and daddy issues and family trauma that he refuses to get over. It's giving very much strip the ego from the bottom, euphoria tease. But it's important to say this because this is just actually a theme that he continues to go. And I think there is this little piece of him that's jealous of people that are able to form good family structures. I mean, honestly, again, I've known Drake. Drake's been, a staple in my life since I was in single digits. And I always wondered why he can never hold on to like a long-term relationship, especially at his age now where it's like, why aren't you? Is there nobody for you? Are you just insatiable? Are you addicted? Are you lust addicted? Or is it you? All of these incredible women that you've been able to have the opportunity to date, SZA, why am I saying Cardi B? Not Cardi B. SZA, you had fucking Serena, you had fucking Rihanna, you had some of the most beautiful, intelligent, amazing young women ever were by your side, and each time you could never make it last. And I feel like you hate yourself because of that, and you see these women move on and build their families with other people who love and appreciate them, and you're just mad for no reason, and it's a loser behavior. So it's important to talk about his family afflictions and how that shows up in different ways in his music. Okay? And that, for all you Drake fans, come to the front. Honestly, let me put this down. Let me put this up. Let me make myself bigger here. No, why is this being weird? Okay, let me make myself bigger. You guys need to listen up to me, and I'm not trying to be facetious or annoying, but here's the actual tea. Like, actually, you guys need to understand the difference between allegations and things that have some merit and why certain things stick and why certain things don't stick. Pusha T said that Drake put money in the street to get tea on him. They didn't have tea on him. So instead, what Drake did was act too good for the fight because they couldn't counter the tea in Drake's life. Drake was hiding the surgery that was discussed in Story of Adidon, Surgical Summer. He talked about the baby and the blackface picture and the baby mom. These are things, if you don't have tea in your life that you're hiding publicly that is damning, then people can't use that tea against you when it comes to rap beef. That's just a point blank in the period. The same people that are sitting here defending Drake, looking up ages of consent in different areas and being weirdos. The point being is the reason why the pedophile line is sticking and the wife beater line is not sticking is because there's open public knowledge and evidence and private stories and all of these corroborated instances of Drake being involved in inappropriate ways with underage girls. That is just what it is. There is blind items. There is personal accounts. There is a bunch of shit that people have discussed about Drake inviting young girls to his mansion to party with him, following high school girls online, going to other countries and being caught up in positions with underage girls. And just because the age of consent is 16 doesn't mean that that's right. You guys are weirdos. You guys are sickos. You're grown. There's images of him kissing on Kylie when she's 16, 15. Like, none of this would stick if there wasn't any evidence for it to stick, but people are pulling receipts, people are pulling out tea, and that's what you dumb, dense bitches don't get. The wife beater allegations don't stick because none of Kendrick's life out there resembles anything like that. He has a reputation to uphold. He leaves the limelight. He doesn't want to be famous. He's not having everything documented, and he's doing his own thing, and that's why the wife beater allegations didn't stick. They didn't stick. And they weren't going to, because how he shows up in the public eye is all people have. What you guys don't understand, it's a perception game. That's why you sling mud to lower someone's perception. We don't know these people. I don't know these people individually, and I will not stick up for a fucking man I do not know. That's a fucking recipe for disaster. But at the end of the day, all we can go and judge things off of is public perception and what's out there. And what's out there for Drake based on his allegations, and what's out there for Kendrick based on the allegations made by Drake are different levels of cooperation. And so that's why it's a different thing. And you're seeing that with Pusha T. No receipts came out. So what did he do? He did the same thing he did with Control, with Kendrick. I'm going on these interviews. I'm downplaying the thing. I'm saying he's a shitty person. I'm saying that I'm a righteous person because I didn't want to go there. And people accepted it again, even though more people were more trepidatious. He could do no wrong back when Kendrick did Control, and he could opt out of that beef and that smoke. But when he opted out of the Pusha T beef, he knew that it was an L just because of the level of allegations levied against him. But also, he was not at the super peak of his career that he was when Control came out. And so more people were kind of like, why aren't you responding? Like, why is this a big deal for you? And that is where I think the armor started to dwindle and chink and start to scuff and get kind of fucked up and compromised. Because at the end of the fucking day, this is hip hop, nigga. So what the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, if you claim you're a student of hip hop and you love this shit, you need to get into battle mode, but you keep doing this thing of doing these interviews. Okay, I'm talking enough. Let me make this smaller and let's continue with the story. So Pusha T happened. Joe Budden, Pusha T. That was an iconic interview. Everyone knows this. Let me make this smaller. Everyone knows this. This is just iconic shit. Boom, boom, boom. And then we have, okay, this goes on. Joe Budden, Pusha T, you get the explanation there. I believe the explanation there. And it's quiet. Drake does Scorpion. People are kind of like, okay, he's slide dissing Pusha T and Kanye and all of these people. And things move back. Then Kanye and Drake make up, and that was an issue with Pusha T. That was a thing that was happening with Pusha T. And then we all kind of collectively move on from the situation and allow Drake to be a dad and just kind of move on from the initial shock. We get it. Mind you, all throughout this time, Kendrick and Drake have been sending shots to each other in multiple verses. They're talking shit about each other in verses, but because it's not the forefront beef in your mind, you're not really clocking for it. Okay, whatever. Now, obviously, I told the story about the Joe Budden podcast, which is important because they sever, they do their own thing, but they're doing much of the same thing. Hip-hop media, centering music, and also talking about hot topics. Joe invites... Okay, so now the Joe Budden podcast, after the severance, he adds in, okay, let me show you the events. So first it was these four, right? Then these two left, and it was just these two, and then Joe added in these two. This is Ish and this is Ice, and these are both of Joe's really good friends, and they fill in for a while the podcast is in its in-between stages, and then they become permanent hosts. They are obviously salaried because that's what Joe wanted. Then after that, Melissa's added for a female perspective. Melissa Ford is an iconic, let's just Google her really quick. Melissa Ford is an iconic video vixen. She was on like Smooth Magazine. This was her back in the day. She did a lot of, she was on Smooth Magazine, all sorts of magazines. She was in a lot of fucking music videos. This picture's iconic. She was just young, hot, and turned back in the day as a video vixen. Very sexy. So she has a name in the hip hop adjacent industry, and she's also really smart and interesting, and she does a really good job of, this is her, showing herself off, and she looks fucking good. So Joe adds her onto the pod, obviously, whatever. And then we have, let's go back. Then we have Queen's Flip, who I didn't know who the fuck was, but he was added to the pod. I think he does a good job. And then after that, we have this guy named Imani, who I just don't care to, he's new. He's really new. I don't care to add him in. So now let's fast forward to current times. There's the Joe Budden pod in its current iteration, which is this plus one person named Imani. And then you have Rory and Mal with their own section of people. Now, the Rory and Mal podcast... So the Rory and Mal podcast, we have Rory and Mal, obviously, and then we have, we have Rory and Mal, we have Julian, who's still there, and these two are not here anymore. These guys aren't here anymore. But basically, at this point currently, where the new beef with Kendrick starts, we have a podcast of 4 people: Rory, Mal, Damaris, and Julian, okay? Now, obviously, this is a new podcast. The Joe Budden podcast had time. I mean, they had been working for years. I had been following them for years. They're still year 3 in. So there's a lot of things that they need to learn how to do. But it's apparent that there's It's apparent, honestly, nowadays that some of the things that Joe was talking about was correct when it came to work ethic and loving the job of podcasting. Joe is addicted to podcasting. That's why he's so good at it. And Rory also was a student of him, but Mal kind of was someone that dabbled in, dabbled out type thing, but wasn't as committed to podcasting as a whole. He's good at it. He's funny naturally, but he doesn't work at it. And I think that's showing up more and more because we're seeing the Rory and Mal podcast start to lose a lot of its credibility after this Kendrick Lamar beef. So let's explain. Okay, so let's listen to Megan Thee Stallion Hiss. Let me pull it up here. It's right here. This song is completely iconic. I think we all know this. I think it's important to understand this. But a lot of Black male hip-hop media will not credit her with... Sorry, I'm eating dinner. Will not credit her with her really cracking off this beef. I think people forget that with celebrities as famous as Drake and as iconic as Drake, it takes a lot for people to decide to change their perception of this person because they're connected to so many of their memories. And I think for my generation, Drake is connected to so many memories that the slow evolution of his perception being viewed negatively has been happening for a really long time. Honestly, I could go in more detail about this, but I honestly, truly feel like as soon as the incel situation, the swap between crooner to incel red pillar started to happen, I think that's when his original core fans, the woman who grew up watching Degrassi, the Black woman that he's expressed that you should, be in love with and all that kind of stuff. As soon as that switch happened, I think more people started to talk more openly about Drake's habit of being with underage girls or interacting with underage girls. Don't quote me on that. That's just a vibe thing. That I honestly think that is when the shift happened. When he decided to go incel, the people he abandoned as his core fan base started to realize, like, some of the things he's saying is weird, some of the things he's doing is weird. Why is he always with young white bitches? Like, it's weird. So, boom. That has been happening, honestly, consistently since probably after Scorpion. I think after the kid thing, people started to be more open about their hatred or dislike or uncomfortableness with Drake. And this is such good salmon. Shouts out to my sister. But I think that as that started to be a topic of conversation that was okay, like okay in the public eye to start to discuss openly without receiving so much unwarranted hate, a lot of the stuff that Kendrick was discussing had been in the news, had been tea, had been in the conversations, like Lipstick Alley, the blind items. People have been talking about it for years. It's just that I think that the male side of his fan base, especially the incel male side of his fan base, had no idea that rumblings about him being inappropriate with girls was even a topic of discussion in other spaces. And so to them, this was a shock. To people like me, to people like my sister, to people who are women with sense, who were abandoned by him in terms of his fan base, these conversations have been happening. Literally. They've been happening for a long time. That's why none of us are surprised. That's why people are sitting here like accepting the situation, because we have been talking about Drake being a weirdo for years. So I say all that to say it's important to pay respect to the people that opened the door for the situation. Like, I feel like you wouldn't get a Cardi B Nicki beef without Remy Ma opening the door and having people change their perception about Nicki just in the public eye, you know? So, super good. So, that being said, I have to give it to Megan Thee Stallion. Now, love the video, love the concept of the snake thing that she low-key weirdly abandoned when she was a butterfly on her cover. Didn't really make a lot of sense, but I think it's obvious she changed the cover, which is good. But this song was good for the moment for me. I want Meg to get back to her freestyling days. I want her to get back to the like big old freak, real Houston, real regional kind of shit when it comes to her stuff, because that's how I love her, in just like raw hip hop, freestyle, any man down, no problem kind of vibe. So her latest stuff hasn't really been necessarily my tea. Maybe I'm just not in her demo, whatever, but I do respect her. I love the fact that she finished college. She's gone through so much. We love her for that. And also, I would be remiss to say this. I'm not saying the Rory and Mal podcast is horrible in totality. I'm saying that this situation has ruined their credibility as a music podcast. What I will say and what I will acknowledge is that they have been on the right side of history when it comes to the Diddy situation and when it comes to Meg's situation, and they were on the forefront of those conversations. They didn't wait for other people to get more information. They heard the information from the jump and said it was weird, said it was fucked up, and they've had consciously good takes on a lot of the other peripheral like situations that happen that are hip-hop adjacent or hip-hop related when it comes to hip-hop music, and which is why a lot of people watch the podcast, for them to talk about albums and music and songs. That is gone out the window. I think they can rebrand into more of a social commentary kind of podcast, or like a hot topics kind of podcast, but I think Maul would have to step up to research more, which I don't think he wants to do. That being said, let's react to his. Let's get into it, and then, yeah.
Saying fuck y'all. I ain't gotta clear my name on a motherfucking thing. Every time I get mentioned, one of y'all bitch ass niggas get 24 hours of attention. I'm finna get this shit off my chest and lay it to rest. Let's go. Still, all these little rap niggas so fraud. Saying niggas be they hardest bars. These niggas hate on BBL and be walking around with the same scars. Real curvy, no etching. Niggas fight to get in my section. Don't speak on my body count if the dick ain't worth coming back for seconds. Cosplay, gangsters, fake ass accents. Posted in another nigga hood like a bad pig. I'm a big.
Okay, that's the main one. A lot of people took that whole moment, the BBL accusations, the posted in another nigga hood like a bad bitch accusations. All of these things, again, can be seen in what Kendrick is pulling from, what even Pusha T is pulling from. Cultureless, bitchy, moody, messy, annoying. They all took that to mean Drake without anything really happening. Mind you, Drake had dissed her at least 2 different times, maybe even 3 different times before this song dropped. He had dissed her in a song and said he was talking about ass shots when he was clearly talking about Megan Thee Stallion. He dissed her when he was on tour, and he was like, shouts out to Meg while he was in Houston. Not Megan Thee Stallion, though. He said something like, oh, the other Meg, which was shady as fuck. And then he posted Free Tory on his shit. So it's one of those things where it's like, she had been cooling for a while and noticing all these people dissing her. And I knew Drake was going to get a shot because it was just so unnecessary for him to diss her the way he dissed her. That being said, a lot of people realize now the bar that people were thinking applied to Nicki Minaj's husband and Nicki Minaj with the court case, and the reason why she went on those crazy rants that were unhinged and crazy for like 3 days on Twitter, calling her Bigfoot and bullet scrap foot or whatever. A lot of people took that to just mean Nicki because it was her, her husband and his proclivity for SA and weird shit, and him being on the offenders list. But now people are looking back when they're doubling it back from the Kendrick shit and looking at the Megan's Law shit applying to Drake. So anyway, you have to give respect to respect is due, especially to this beautiful Black woman who's strong and has gone through a lot. I had to put her in this video because a lot of people are missing the fact that she cracked it off, or the Black men in the hip hop media space just don't want to crack it off. They don't want to say it. They don't want to give credit where credit is due. And Meg definitely was responsible for continuing the shift of Drake's perception negatively, and then she cracked the window so that Kendrick could stomp it out, So we have these separate podcasts, they're doing their thing. Then we have the Like That verse. Okay. So we have the Like That verse that comes out. Okay, you get it. So we all know this, but basically, this whole recent shit cracked off. Well, let's actually be accurate. So first person shooter. Let's be accurate here. First Person Shooter is a song that was on Drake's For All the Dogs album, where he and J. Cole get on a song and they go back and forth, and basically J. Cole in his verse is basically like, it's my time now, it was Drake's time, then it was Kendrick's time, but now it's my time, I'm in my prime, and we're the big 3, and so whatever. Honestly, that verse was one of those things where it was similar to me like the Control verse, where it was just adding fuel into the fire of the hip-hop game. Whoever felt hit could holler, whoever wanted to respond could respond. If people disputed the big 3, they could make a song going at J. Cole, but they didn't. And people were like, whoa, he's calling out Kendrick in a song with Drake. People know that they've been beefing, so it's like, yeah, the big 3. So this happens, and again, lighthearted, not a big deal. It's nothing serious. And then Kendrick goes with the Like That verse. And the Like That verse, to me, is similar to the Control verse, where it's just like, you guys mentioned me first, I'm letting you know, again, it's up, it's smoke. I am the best. Fuck the big three. It's just big me. I am on a different level than both you niggas. First of all, Kendrick, there's some spice to it because Kendrick already hates Drake. We already know this. But with J. Cole, he has a relationship with J. Cole, so he's just saying like, it's a friendly sparring response. It didn't have to go where it went, but Drake took it there. So this goes down, and Kendrick does select that verse, and everyone's like, oh my God, who's going to respond? Then J. Cole does the 7-minute. So bad. So J. Cole does 7-minute drill, which is this. Or just, he deleted it later. The beat's good. Kind of sounds like a Drake beat, honestly.
Come with extensions, my dog like say the word. He on one doing the clinching. I came up, that was your prime. I was trailing right behind, and I just now hit mine. Now I'm front of the line.
So he's kind of going off of what he was talking about in first person shooter, where he was like, I was trailing behind, but I was still there. But then now look at me, like it's my prime. I'm gonna kill you, fucking niggas. And then he was attacking Kendrick's music discography, and the J. Cole stupid bitches were on Twitter acting fucking fugazi and dumb as fuck, talking about, oh yeah, finally To Pimp a Butterfly slander is okay, stupid shit. You know what I'm saying? So boom, this happened. Then not even a week later, I don't know if it was even 48 hours, J. Cole goes to Dreamville Fest and gets on the stage and does this.
Except for one part. Mm-hmm. It's one part of that shit that make me feel like, man, that's the lamest shit.
So basically, sorry, I had to do that. So basically, in this whole portion, he's talking about the fact that he himself didn't feel right about dissing Kendrick. He felt pressured by the community, by the world after the Like That verse, and he basically felt compelled and pushed to respond when he didn't really want to respond in the way that he wanted to respond. He felt like everyone said this, Joe said this when he was recapping the verse, and he was just like, it doesn't seem like he wants to fucking do this. Okay. He does this apology. All of hip hop media goes insane. Now, what I will say, because we're talking about Joe Budden Pod versus Rory and Mal Pod, this is the undercurrent of the story. Joe Budden Pod handled it well because they handled it holistically. They have a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. I think Mel was really good on this episode. But in general, Joe was like, as a MC, I'm disappointed that he would recant his statement. And this is kind of, I have issues with how he did it. But as a human being, he respected him for standing up for his boundaries and where he felt comfortable. That was a sentiment from the Joe Pod. Mal, J. Cole. Let's see where he, hopefully. Let's see. I think it's this one.
No, Rory, it's not.
But here's the interesting thing about all of this that I don't think people is looking at. If this was a battle between J. Cole and Drake, I think J. Cole performs his diss record to Drake on that stage last night. What are we talking? Losing sleep over what?
Okay, so see, okay, this is where I started to see the cracks with this pod. Now, as someone who's like a fan of the hip hop shit and like hip hop media in general, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm not a fan of J. Cole. That's a personal thing. Look up what he did to No Name. That's a personal vendetta that I have, and I think he's fake, and I think he's whatever. But that being said, no shade. I'm a Kendrick girl. That being said, I felt like what Mal was doing was overkill. There was a clip that went viral. He was going ham. They got a lot of numbers for this episode. Let's see. Yeah, 167,000. They usually average 30 to 50,000 per episode. I know this because I watch the show. And so this goes viral. So everyone wants to watch this episode. Everyone wants to watch him talking about it. And I think they start to lean into Mal's volatileness and his terrible takes, because the reality of the situation is, it is what it is. At the end of the day, you shouldn't be getting this emotional about another man's decision to not engage in a rap beef for your entertainment. It is what it is. He's gonna eat that. People are gonna judge him no matter what about dropping out of this whole situation. And obviously, quiet as it's kept, as we have now learned later, Schoolboy Q, who is also a member of Black Hippie and TDE, warned J. Cole at Dreamville Fest to just step out of the beef, and that's kind of what pushed him to step out of the beef publicly. We know this. Maul's going crazy, but Joe took a very different approach. So we see Maul go crazy.
What are you losing sleep over, Jermaine? What the? You got a sold out Dream Fest. Your entire hometown.
Look how annoyed Rory looks.
What the fuck are you?
It's like he's going ham, and I get it. Like the most of the sentiments for people in hip hop on a face value level was this, but this went viral. So then Maul kind of leaned into this being like this rambunctious, very emotional character, which to me, he's in the school of Joe. If we're keeping it a bean, I'm not trying to be a bitch, but it's fucking true. He's in the school of Joe. This is Joe all over it. Joe has meltdowns. Joe yells into the microphone. Joe goes crazy and is irrational on the mic. That is something that made the original pod with them four really good. Because Joe was like that, Maul was cool, and Rory was kind of the instigator young one, and then Parks was the reasonable one, you know? Now we see Maul kind of trying to step into that role because he's super passionate about this. This goes viral, and you kind of see the pod episodes after this kind of continue. Now, they fumbled in a big way. We'll get into this, but let's compare Joe talking about it. J. Cole. Because I just want you guys to see what I mean in terms of how he... Here.
So we called it that it was going to be open season on Cole.
Yeah. It didn't start yet.
It
didn't start yet.
I know what you mean.
Rappers feel, yo.
Yeah,
and that is how rappers
generally.
I've been speaking to rappers all week. That's how most of the good rappers feel.
Yeah.
A part of us died watching the spirit of competition in the way that it did with our Titans. That's all.
Niggas that everybody respects.
Okay, so you kind of see the general take. Like, Joe approached it from a different approach, and he is a rapper, so he kind of understands. He's saying, disappointed, the spirit of hip-hop, the spirit of competition. These are some of the people who are considered the big three. Obviously, J. Cole's not really considered that now. I mean, maybe Drake maybe is on the demoted side of the biracials in this conversation. But Joe was kind of like, I'm disappointed. It was giving very much, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed, as like a parent. And then Maul took this very intense route that was super emotional, but it went viral. Joe got a little emotional on this in terms of yelling and talking and making his point known, but he always came back to, if this is what he wants, if this is the peace he's seeking, I'm in a place where I can accept that. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Like, that's kind of where he was at with it, which I think was the mature approach, because it would have been cool to see all three of them go at it and see who emerged to be at the top, and would J. Cole actually be able to overtake these two that have had a stranglehold on the hip-hop industry for the past 15 years? Who knows? But no, like, it didn't happen that way, and I think that you can see this difference with how they deal with it. I think Maul is more immature about it and surface level. So this happens. Now here's a big fumble. Obviously, we have Euphoria. No. We have push-ups. Let's be accurate. We have push-ups by Drake.
For the Swifties, top say drop, you better drop and give them 50.
Okay, we all know this by now. To me, I heard this and I was like, you stupid nigga. Because it's like, this wasn't anything. He has small feet, he's short. Whitney was kind of slyly mentioned here. Top TDE, his splits, and how he got out of the situation was mentioned here. Okay. This isn't anything. And if you're going to go the T route, then go the T route. Because at the end of the day, what he thought he could do was go the T route and splash dirt on Kendrick's name. But everyone has more tea on Drake because he lives his life openly, and even the bad shit he lives openly. And so if you're going to go the tea route, you have to make sure you have a person that's more debaucherous than you. And that wasn't the case here. Because Kendrick could always trump what you were going to say about him. So the pips squeaking and this, to me, when I heard this, I was like, bitch, please. Like, Kendrick is going to walk you. And I knew that before Kendrick opened his mouth. Okay. This happens. Right? Then we have the Rick Ross. Now, this is important in the beef. Because a lot of bitches are going to do revisionist history. They're going to say, why did I just search Rick Ross? Rick Ross, champagne moments. Here we go. Okay, so this is important. Push-Ups came out. 2 hours later, Rick Ross dropped Champagne Moments. He dropped it official audio on Dat Piff, as you can see here. That's a big deal because that's a culture thing. If you are not torrenting music online, getting the mixtapes as soon as they dropped off of Dat Piff, then you don't know. We're not peers. You're too young to speak to me in terms of this shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was iconic, and I clocked this immediately because I have an older sister, like I keep saying, and she taught me how to torrent music, how to burn CDs, all of that cool shit. So Dat Piff was very important in our household. So the fact that the official audio came out on Dat Piff was a big deal. Now, again, it's important because when it's hip hop battle shit, polish is off. It's about the effectiveness of your record, how quick you deliver it back, blase, squaze. So 2 hours after Push-Up drops, he mentions Rick Ross and Push-Ups, so Rick Ross goes into the stew and drops this into 2 hours later. Respect was had automatically off rip because of that, because that is something to respect. You heard your name, you got in the stew. Love that. Love that. And then he delivered an effective song. So let's listen to this. It's important.
Fish tanks and marble floors, living big and bad. Niggas laugh until they hit with my official jab. Crack smoke is the exhaust from my pen and pad. Ghost writers, they get the floss, what you could have had.
So we're seeing a theme. Can we admit that we're seeing a theme? Meek said it. We have Kendrick saying it. We have Pusha saying it. We have Rick Ross saying it. Ghost writers. We're seeing similar themes being pulled. Now, the reason why this song is arguably one of the most important turning moments, because for me personally, it was iconic because this confirmed that this was not going to be a Meek Mill situation. What Drake thought Push-Ups would do, and a lot of people were overhyping it, I wasn't into it that much personally. But people were overhyping it and understood because he was going at all these different people, and I get it. I get why they were hyping it up. But this happening 2 hours later, where Rick is talking about the ghostwriters, he's talking about the phony, he's talking about the cultural appropriation. He's talking about all of the themes that, again, Pusha T was pulling from, and Joe was pulling from, and Kendrick was pulling from this fucking dude. So it adds some corroboration to some of the things that Pusha T was saying and some of the things that Kendrick is going to say. So, again, you can say what you want to say. You can say this record came and went. It wasn't polished. It was impactful because it set up what Kendrick was about to do in a real way. And it was unpredictable. No one thought that Rick Ross was going to respond in 2 hours, but he went in and he did his thing, and that's respectable. And you have to give him the respect off of that tip, period.
Record label taking a loss, all you had to fight in school. Always ran, another nigga had to write your grooves. Flow was copy and paste, Weezy gave you the juice. Another white boy at the park wanna hang with the crew.
You see?
Bullet surprise when they're switching up like dyed denim. Getting settles for all the killings while we ride rentals. Look me right in my face. Nigga, that's why you had operation to make your nose smaller than your father knows, nigga. I don't follow you, nigga, cause you said the motherfucking cease and desist to French Montana, nigga. You said the police, nigga, hated on my dog project. That wasn't the same white boy that I seen, nigga.
Mind you, the backstory is, right, the reason why Rick Ross was even mentioned in Push-Ups was because after all of the beef happened, Rick Ross uploaded an Instagram story where he was listening to the Like That song, which basically confirmed. And what we saw after the Like That song dropped was a lot of people take a fat step back from being associated with Drake, respecting Drake, liking Drake, right? Boom. So we have the Metro Boomin Future album, Like That, was on that. This caused Rick Ross's and Drake's beef. Rick Ross unfollowed Drake and was doing the Like That in his Instagram stories. And then we have, obviously, the Metro Boomin Future Project Part 2 that came out a few weeks after the original project, where you have The Weeknd and A$AP Rocky, who are also on this album beefing with Drake, and it's clear that people are beefing with Drake. What you're starting to see is an industry-wide step back from Drake, and this was some of the themes that were referenced on all situations. Like, you're not legitimate, you steal shit, you're not a good person, is basically what everyone is saying. Now, I want to take time to talk about the Weeknd beef really quick and the A$AP Rocky beef. The Weeknd beef started a long time ago. People basically, what I have deduced, first of all, love the Weeknd. I had each mixtape individually. I know it was repackaged as a trilogy, but I knew when those dropped individually. So I've been a long time Weeknd fan. I like his old, sad, druggy shit the most. But anyway, he has solidified himself outside of Drake. But people who know that they were kind of same kind of area, Canada. They were kind of dominating at the same time. This, again, was high school for me. They were not friends for very long. Okay, like they had The Zone, which is an amazing song between the two of them. I love that song and that music video, but they had The Zone, and then they kind of stopped collaborating after Take Care, and that is allegedly because The Weeknd did a lot of the writing for a lot of the songs on Take Care, and Drake kind of stole his sound, as he's known to do as a colonizer. Now, after all this, after the disses on the future Metro Boomin album that A$AP Rocky and him did, where he's saying, you know, you got your fucking shooters doing TikToks and shit, I went back to King of the Fall, which was a song I was obsessed with as a kid. This is a Weeknd, I know, which is so funny. But this song dropped, I don't know when this song dropped.
I'm add it up, I just ate a plate for breakfast. Put it in a cup, then I mix it up with Texas. Just feeling heavy like I'm rigid on my necklace. Just how we came with all of your just jealous. And these are my is that they package. And you sounding like my pet. Bring your girl to my show, give her floor seats. Then she go downtown like she own me. XOXOXO. Mix it up, pull it up, take it down slow. This is my sound, your sound, did it from the ground. That's
Okay, I feel like that last part was directed at Drake. Don't fight me on it, but it's clear. If you listen to the whole song, now with the new context, you can kind of see that he's beefing with Drake in this song. This song is a classic. People who know. So this song, I mean, they've been beefing for a long time. It was Undercover, it was Sly. But they were close and now they're not close. Then we have, obviously, A$AP, who's, you know, protecting his woman. Drake is notably bitter that he didn't end up with Rihanna. He's said it multiple times. He said it, actually. Let's see. Drake, Rihanna, LeBron. See? Oh, that was my mistake. LeBron.
I was really hard on my parents for giving me sort of a childhood that I had to wrap my mind around, you know, as I grew. I, you know, multiple times sort of suggested that they could have done a better job of whatever it was. Yeah, co-parent.
That too.
Well, I mean,
and I didn't get it too.
By the way, I wanted that too. I want Rihanna, like, you know, where I don't have the fairy tale, like, oh, Drake started a family with Rihanna, like, this is like so perfect.
Okay, so you get what I'm getting at. Like, he The Rihanna thing, I think, is where he turned incel-y. Don't get mad at me, but I think this is an important contention and an important point in time. He turned incel, I think, after he was publicly embarrassed when he tried to kiss her and said he loved her publicly on stage. That being said, A$AP Rocky ended up with Rihanna, which I thought was more appropriate. If you've ever seen the Fashion Killer video, which is, I need to, they have chemistry. I mean, look at this video. It's so cute. See, look at them. This is iconic. See? Okay, this era of her, iconic. But this is from 10 years ago. The chemistry in this video, watch this video if you want to see, how they fell in love. They're perfect for each other. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. But anyway, Drake never got over that. He didn't end up with Rihanna. I think that's, if we could track where the songs changed from being more women-centric and croony to incel-y, I think him being publicly embarrassed by Rihanna was one of those moments. So anyway, A$AP Rocky do their own private beat situation. A$AP Rocky, The Weeknd, they beef, they throw shots at Drake, blah, blah, blah. Again, the situation is heating up around Drake in this realization where there's many people in this industry who don't fuck with you. Many people hate you. So, boom. Let's fast forward a little quicker. We get Euphoria. No, we get, sorry. Let's get Tailor Made. This is an important point because this gets discussed later.
Deal with this viciously. You seem a little nervous about all the publicity. Club is Canadian, lights get dot. We need to know the baby West Coast victory, man. It was me and Snoop Dogg. Pass it to Snoop.
Okay, so this was a mistake on many, many, many levels. First of all, the Tupac and Snoop AI voices was a mistake. That was a cultural mistake that if someone was of the culture, they would never make because it was just wildly disrespectful if you respect hip-hop culture and you're a student of it. Point blank, period. That being said, Drake also says somewhere in the Tupac verse where he's like, oh, you heard I like young girls. You just probably heard that on the Joe Budden podcast. Again, putting the Joe Budden podcast in the light of it being relevant, You hear me. I'm just repeating myself. But basically, Joe, on the Joe Budden podcast with Rory and Mal back in the day, Teenage Fever, was calling out Drake for his Teenage Fever song. And also, here.
Look, I'm not all for y'all let Drake make Teenage Fever.
See?
What's wrong with Teenage Fever? What's wrong with that record? All right.
Joe was calling out the weird shit from back then. This is back with the old pod. He also talked about Jaded with Georgia Smith, and he talked about that and brought that back up again. But Drake references that in Tailor Made Freestyle, like, oh, you heard I like young girls from the Joe Budden pod type thing. And it's like, why are you even saying that? But it's clear that he's volunteering. He's in that first section with Tupac, he's trying to be like, I'm a light-skinned, biracial, blah, blah, blah. He's trying to throw all the things that he thinks Kendrick is going to throw because he's going crazy. Obviously, the silence is deafening to him. He's getting anxiety, waiting, and then Euphoria drops. Opening up my mind, my cranium for weeks. So Euphoria drops. I mean, I don't think we need to really go into it. You and I both know it's an iconic song. Euphoria is 6 minutes and 24 seconds of just rap, hip-hop clinic. It is the samples from the beat changes, from the topics, from the prophecy that he's discussing with us through his rap lyrics of what he's about to do surgically to Drake as a person, as a perception, is in that song. So Euphoria drops. We know that. Everyone's like, oh my God. Euphoria drops. Joe Budden on the Joe Budden podcast plays the whole song, talks about the whole song, and is like, oh my God, like this is incredible. Now, Rory and Mal don't play the song, and they kind of are like, yeah, this is good, but you can tell that Mal is overwhelmingly OVO leaning. Now, another important point that, again, this is casual, we're jumping around, follow me, but after the Rick Ross Champagne Moments drop, the Rory and Mal podcast pissed me off from that point when it came to the beef because of how they reported on that. Specifically the way Mal reported on that. And again, it's another instance of the loss of credibility between Rory and Mal versus Joe Budden. I think Joe Budden's hip-hop credibility came through during this moment, and Rory and Mal's diminished because of Mal. So we had Mal freaking out about the J. Cole thing. They went viral. They were leaning into moments like that because they got more views than normal. Then after that, the Rick Ross situation happened, and this goes down, and Rory and Mal are kind of like, why did Rick jump into the beef? And Mal was like, it's a distraction. Why is he talking about this? And just kind of was like, I didn't dignify it with anything. And he talked about how he talked directly to Drake about it. And Drake was like, he said he had more money than me and I didn't take him seriously. I turned it off. And then Mal was just acting as a mouthpiece for Drake in this moment from this point on. Euphoria drops, right? Then we have 616 in LA, which you guys already know. And again, this is a fumble for Rory and Mal. This could have been a moment where they solidified themselves as hip-hop media, as a lot of people were able to do. Rory had a birthday, right? So Rory was out of town, and they drop a pre-recorded episode when this happens, when the Euphoria 616 situation happens. It was their time to drop a new episode. They didn't rally to do anything. They could have done Zoom. They could have done a bunch of shit. It wouldn't have sounded great, but at least they would have had an episode commemorating the situation. They were not there. Rory was on vacation for his birthday, and I get it. So he did his birthday shenanigans, and they had a pre-recorded episode, which, again, hurt them, did not help them. Then when they came back, so much had happened that it felt like they were rushing through the things, whereas the Joe Budden podcast did a whole 4, almost 5-hour podcast going through all the songs. So from the Joe Budden podcast perspective, he did an entire video breaking down the lyrics of Euphoria 101. Then he did an entire video on the Patreon discussing 616 in LA. And as we know, after 616 in LA, that night was crazy because then we got the Family Matters. And then after Family Matters, we got immediately 30 minutes after, we got the Meet the Grams. And then the next day we got Not Like Us. That is how it went. But so Joe did a whole video on this, did a whole video on 616 for the Patreon, and then they took a break and came back and respected each song that had come out during that process. So they talked about Family Matters. They played the whole song. Joe was stopping. They were discussing. And then after that, they went into Meet the Grams. Then after that, they went into Not Like Us. That is something that Rory and Mal didn't do. That is something Rory and Mal cannot do because they don't have the license to be able to play the full song on their pod. So Rory and Mal missed this opportunity. So they did not have a video on Euphoria alone because Rory was on vacation. They had a pre-recorded episode and people had to wait a whole week. And after the whole week happened, all of these songs had dropped. And then they came back and then they provided a lackluster episode going through all the songs while people, their fans, were waiting for them to do a full breakdown. And they did not do a full breakdown. Then we had Mal, who was pouting because by the time that they were revisiting Euphoria, 616, and all these songs that had dropped while Rory's on vacation and actually doing it in real time, Mal was butthurt by the Not Like Us stuff. So honestly, after that, you see Mal get unhinged. So let's see. Mal unhinged. Let's see. Okay, maybe that's not the best. Mal, Drake beef.
Kendrick is addressing Drake's culture vulture ways and the way that he steals from the fucking culture.
What did he steal?
We not talking about how he said.
All of you niggas, including tour. Don't make me sit here and look like I'm dick riding. Go look at all the interviews. These niggas are saying, yo, if it wasn't for homie.
Okay. We don't need to get into it, but basically that is how the whole episode is. And that is, again, I think a misstep from the Rory and Mal podcast from a podcasting perspective, because at the end of the day, you can have the discussion. Joe Budden showed you how to be able to have the discussion with someone like Ish in the crowd. But at the end of the day, when you let someone like that go unchecked, it loses and tanks your entire credibility. So now we're on strike 3, right? We have the J. Cole intensity where he's mad that a man is saying, hey, I'm not really fucking with the beef shit. He's mad, physically mad at that. But it goes viral. So they're kind of like, okay, no harm, no foul. Then after that, to me, there's a Rick Ross conversation and his very impactful place in the beef not being respected by Mal, and Mal being like, I talked to Drake, da-da-da. So he's establishing that he's an OVO mouthpiece from that take. Okay, whatever. Then it's these clips that come out from this episode where they're going through the entire beef because they had missed the fucking podcast. Again, another misstep. It's honestly strike 4. Them missing the podcast and not being available to discuss the beef in real time is problematic. So that's part 4, because Joe was doing it and they were missing opportunity for content. And if it was about the pod, then you would find a way to Zoom or whatever. They did not do that. It is what it is, and they disappointed their fans then. Then they come back and Mal is unhinged. He's not even being reasonable. He's not even someone you can even reason with in this conversation because he's so emotional, because whatever Drake was doing was not hitting. Big for this ending part. Long story short, right? You have these 2 different podcasts that were once joined out as one, and one is showing you how to do it versus one showing you not how to do it, because their reliance on Mal's volatility, which he isn't doing in a Joe Budden way that is more targeted and more meaningful, and not allowing the other position or not pushing back, because with Joe, he can go unhinged, but Ish is going to be unhinged back. You know what I mean? Here, it was just Mal going unhinged and all these people kind of trying to placate him, which is annoying because he was dead ass wrong. He's over here now in the most recent episode talking about now Kendrick's dragging it. And it's like, you were just talking about how this nigga wasn't going to drop. He dropped. Your man failed. It is widely discussed that he is a loser in this. It is what the fuck it is. If you're not going to sit here and say, hey, he played the game well, I'm going to acknowledge these things, I'm going to acknowledge these things, you're just blindly in support of fucking Drake, and it's embarrassing, and it's ruining the credibility of you guys as a hip-hop podcast. I get that Drake has friends. I mean, with academics, at the end of the day, we know he's biased. We know he's annoying. We know he's problematic. We know all of these things about him. So him being the mouthpiece for Drake isn't surprising. But even he is smart enough to say that was a good strategy, or I respect that decision, or Kendrick killed this video. He's smart enough to call a spade a spade. Mal is so unhinged and up Drake's ass that he can't even call a spade a spade. And so when real shit comes up where it's like, yeah, I mean, of course he's going to get a #1 song from this iconic song that's a rap beat, diffs. Then he's going to do the Juneteenth concert to solidify that song as a cultural landmark. Then he's going to do a video because that song is still at #3 4 weeks later. And it's going to keep being the song of the summer no matter what the fuck you want to say. And the reality is, he is weird with younger girls. Whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about particulars of the age of consent in Toronto. But if it's under 18, you're weird for arguing that being okay to deal with when this man's almost fucking 40. And then on top of that, you're going to say, well, the allegations are still allegations for Kendrick. Nigga, the allegations are not allegations for Kendrick anymore because his baby mom and him are together. They're fine. Clearly, she's by his side. She didn't have to speak up for shit because she knew her man was going to handle him. Even though she was being negged on, she knew what the truth was. Those kids are Kendrick's. You cannot deny that. And so everything that Drake was saying was true that you were defending him on the basis of is dead ass wrong and has been proven dead ass wrong for every week that this beef continues. You look like a fucking freak. You look like a fucking loser. And that's just what the fuck it is. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. And you guys need to understand that. So Maul, I think, is gonna eventually tank the pod. I wouldn't be surprised if the pod tanks. Because they're not doing enough to save the pod, and they're not doing enough work on the outside of the seams to really solidify themselves in the culture. This was a moment to do so. This is a sink or swim moment for a lot of people in hip hop media, and a lot of people saw the opportunity and ran with it. They went on vacation. Not a good move. So boom. We're wrapping up this. I respect how Joe did it. I respect that Joe, no matter what, dedicated the time and did what he needed to do. He took his allotted breaks, but he was always there when it was podcast episode day. He did extra Patreon shit for the people who are patronies. And it was good content because he actually gave it the time to breathe, which I respect. And I'm excited for next week's episode because, as most people know, the Not Like Us shit just dropped. Okay, now, again, sorry about the casualness of this. What's good? Okay, first of all, what I have to say in conclusion, I'll start the conclusion off like this. I wish and I hope if anybody who's good at Excel can do this for me, I will love you for a million lifetimes. If you could create an Excel line graph, where one line plots the exponential growth of Drake's career and the other line is plotting the exponential growth of media platforms like Genius or Lyrical Lemonade or Noisy or any kind of platform, even Vice low-key, but any kind of platform in that vein, because I think they're related. I think that Drake took the fame of being a hip hop artist to heights that it had never seen. And I think that his widening demographic of people that were influenced by his music created this thing where now the music needed to be deciphered because Drake fans were being introduced to hip hop through Drake, and some of them wanted to be introduced to other forms of hip hop. And unlike before, when hip hop was like a counterculture thing, you had to either be raised black, you have to live near black people, have some adjacency to black people in your life at all, black friends, something for you to get the references in the music and for you to understand the samples in the songs, what they're talking about when they're hinting at different universal black experiences. Because hip hop is black. You cannot remove the racial component from hip hop. It is very much a black thing. It is very much a black experience. It's very much a black oral history, if you're going to let me tell it. So I believe that shows like the Genius Lyrical Breakdown or like, you know, the Noisy interview where that white nerdy guy is interviewing Kendrick and there's like 17,000 Bloods in the background and shit. It's like shows and media like that started to become popular as Drake became popular. And I just want to prove that in a line graph. If you're familiar with how to do that, please do it for me. That'd be great. Because at the end of the day, Drake lowered the barrier of entry for people to be able to understand and be influenced by hip hop music. He lowered the bar all the way low so anybody could understand his music. And I think that's part of the reason that Kendrick called him out. It's a culture versus corporate conversation. It's not really a Drake conversation, but it is. I think that Drake was an industry plant. I've made a TikTok video about this where I think that Drake was the original Tekashi 6ix9ine. We could talk about that. Maybe I'll make a video on that. Ciao. Who knows? But, you know, at the end of the day, I think that Drake was like a Trojan horse because he's barely biracial, not to be weird, but culturally he's not black. Culturally he was raised Jewish. That's just the facts. He got in touch and had a relationship with his dad later in his life, not his formative years. And so I think that he was a perfect Trojan horse, just black enough to be able to step and dip his toe into hip hop. But he has been used by the corporations to separate and distance hip hop from the black experience. And it is innately the black experience that makes hip hop what it is. So that's why I think personally I got off Drake, because I was like, you're not growing, you're not expanding, you're not using this as an art form. Yeah, the beats are good. Yeah, You can get a vibe up at a party. But at the end of the day, even YG had some meaningful shit in his raps. Like, and he's known to be a turn-up guy. I don't know. I think that Kendrick is, the reverberations of this Kendrick Drake beef are not over. And I think that it's going to put a lot of people on fucking notice. I think Rory and Mal and the pod and how they fumbled this moment, they could have solidified themselves in rap hip hop media and just solidified their podcasts had they just done a little bit more work and just been a little smarter about their moves, especially since, like, as I said, they've historically had great takes on things that are adjacent to hip hop, like the Diddy stuff or the Megan stuff, hip hop adjacent. But when it comes to the music stuff, they went in a completely different direction and totally tanked their credibility. This is the reverberations of the conversation that Kendrick is talking about in this beef. Corporations, selling yourself out. Like, people are asking, is Mal on the payroll? He was the one rolling out push-ups and the Family Matters. Like, why is that? What is going on? Like, again, drawing the comparison to Academic, we know that he loves Drake. That's obvious. But he can call a spade and he can admit it. I think it's important that you recognize the difference in quality of what you're getting between the Rory and Mal podcast when it comes to hip hop commentary and the Joe Budden podcast. I think that Mal is in the school of Joe with the meltdowns, but Joe does it better and he knows how to use that emotion a lot better. I think that Joe treated this beef as the historical moment that it was, the special moment that it was. He treated it with care. He knew that people wanted him to break down every inch, have every deep conversation possible about the lyrics, about the strategy, especially with his long history beefing with Drake. And I just honestly feel like he showed up in a way more professional way and took this moment for what it was, which was hip hop history. Looking back at this, Rory and Mar are going to look back at this and see how they acted in this moment. And I'm telling you, I'm giving them 6 months to a year. I'm giving them 6 months to a year. And that's if they do nothing to try and fix it. It's possible they can outlast my prediction, but I'm rarely wrong. I think that they're selling their credibility out in the hopes of getting views. And that's embarrassing. Yeah. If you want more videos like this, continue to support, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I do different content as well. I do a podcast called Bloodstained where I talk about history through the lens of true crime. And if that interests you at all, please do not hesitate to hit the link in the bio, subscribe to my Substack, get into some things, and listen to my podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Link in that link tree. All is there. Or watch the visual on YouTube. It's always here. Anyway, love you. Thank you for listening. Black Lives Matter. Free Palestine until it's backwards, bitch. Mwah.